My name is Kira Vaughn, and I'm 31 years old. Competence doesn't brag, it schedules. The dishwasher slides into off-peak at 12:01 because 3 months ago I read a rate card like it was gospel. The last cell in my budget turns green with a soft, almost private satisfaction. My condo, my name on the deed, my name on the bills, sits steady, a boat trimmed to weather. No one thanks ballast until the hull tips. Lately my hull has been creaking. Evan says he's busy. Busy is a rubber word. Stretch it far enough and you can wrap a secret in it. The phone face down. The quick, sly smiles at something he won't share. The angled screen when I walk in. The classic signs, as old as curiosity. I'm not a snoop. I'm not an idiot either. A name kept surfacing in notifications. Sienna, first as a harmless old contact, then with a frequency that suggested habit. We dated once, he said when I finally asked, light as dust. It was nothing. She's just a friend now. We mostly talk about work. Don't worry. When men say don't worry, they mean don't look. Thursday went loud in a single sentence. I set 2 bowls of garlicky tomato soup on the table and watched steam drift like a curtain I could step behind if I wanted to disappear. Evan, I said, what's going on with us? He sighed, as if I'd interrupted something important. His performance, maybe. Kira, you're wonderful. You're stable. Is this the part where you say but? He smiled, apologetic and pleased with himself. I'm 31. This is my prime. Am I supposed to just settle? Be tied down? Sienna is exciting. I don't know. I just feel alive with her. He held my gaze with a tenderness that made the cruelty of it antiseptic. I need to be sure, okay? I need you to prove you're better than my other options. He said it gently. The gentleness was the knife. Something inside me clicked, like a breaker thrown in a dark house. Light goes out. Silence follows. The room didn't change, but I did. You're right, I said, very evenly. Total fairness. A person should know their worth on the open market. His shoulders lowered. I watched relief bloom across his face like a bruise in reverse. I knew you'd understand. You're always so mature about these things. I picked up my spoon and tasted the soup. It needed salt. You should go take some time. Go be with Sienna. Test drive the exciting option. Really? You're not mad? Impressed, I said, and for once the word felt honest. Not about him, about me. Honesty is rare. He beamed, truly beamed, kissed my temple like he was stamping approval on a purchase order, and said, I'll stay with my brother a few days. Clear my head. Don't wait up, I said, because I like symmetry. He left whistling. The door clicked. The hallway swallowed him. I waited 10 minutes, enough time for a person with second thoughts to have them. The breaker inside me stayed down. The iPad he used for streaming lay on the couch. He never bothered with passcodes. Passwords were for people who feared memory. I opened messages, found Sienna by the cheerful cluster of recent blue and gray. I typed, Hi Sienna, Kira here. Evan's stable option. He says you're the exciting one. Congratulations. I'm not interested in competing. I'm packing his things. He has a lot, including a giant custom neon sign that says The Good Life. I'm putting everything in a 10x10 storage unit. First month is $180. Since you're the current option, want to split it? $90 each. I stared at the text. My hand didn't shake. I hit send. 3 minutes later. Is this a joke? Yes. No joke. He told me to prove my market value. I'm declining to participate. You can pick up the inventory with him. Or without him. Your call. A dot pulsed, stopped, pulsed again. Then, whatever, $90. Venmo tag? I sent it. The ping landed like a tiny bell at the end of a performance. I'm not a hero. I'm a project manager. I manage chaos by turning it into lists. By 8:12 p.m., the storage unit was booked online. By 8:17, I had a confirmation email and a reservation code that sounded like a verdict. By 8:20, a locksmith texted back, 8 Honig a.m. Tomorrow. I pulled cardboard from the hall closet, the good uniform boxes I keep for moves I hope never to make. The first one unfolded with a papery snap. The tape sang. I labeled it with a fine black marker, Evan, books, and random. Random did most of the heavy lifting in our relationship. I moved room to room, unhooking his preferences from my life. The bomber jackets he liked because they made him feel taller. The indistinguishable colognes with names that sounded like yachts. The sneaker wall he curated like a museum that didn't allow women to speak above a whisper. A photograph of us fell from a shelf, laughing. My hair was shorter, his eyes were softer. I slid the photo into a box without ceremony, like a leaf pressed between pages. The neon sign stared at me from the living room wall, bathing everything in a tacky, optimistic pink. The good life hummed like a lie that couldn't keep its story straight. I unplugged it carefully. Bubble wrap whispered around its letters as I swaddled it like an infant I did not love. Ping, $90 received from Sienna. Ping, don't give him my number. Ping, seriously. I muted the thread. The project was advancing. The spreadsheet in my brain populated with tasks. Book unit, done. Pack. In progress. Locksmith at 8 on Quoc. Confirmed. Change Wi-Fi password. Set reminder. Cancel his guest key fob. Email sent. Mail the second unit key to Sienna. Pending. At 11:09 p.m., I sat on the floor among boxes and the wrapped neon sign and took my first full breath of the night. Relief arrived at the edges, uncertain of its welcome. I thought of his smile, the one he wore when he said options, the way he tested the word in his mouth like a new hobby. He wanted a marketplace. Markets have rules. One of them is, when inventory leaves the shelf, it doesn't get to complain about the packaging. I packed his last desk drawer, receipts, a broken watch he swore he'd fix, a keychain from a long-ago festival that smelled like old rain, tape, label, stack. I turned off the living room lamp. The room suddenly looked like mine again, plain, quiet, undecorated by someone else's ambition. At midnight, the dishwasher hummed itself on. The rate card logic clicked into place. The machine did what it was told. I smiled at the ordinary magic of systems that work. At 12:03 a.m., a text from Evan. Love that you're being cool about this. Don't wait up. I might crash at Sienna's. I typed and deleted 3 drafts. Then I sent the truth that required no adjectives. Good luck. I set my alarm for 7:12. Precision is a mercy. Morning would be logistics, not grief. The last thing I did before bed was set a small padded envelope on the console table. Inside, a copy of the storage key on a brass ring, addressed to Sienna Cho in neat, even letters. I turned out the lights. In the quiet, ballast held. The breaker stayed down, and the market, somewhere beyond my walls, kept humming to itself, counting, pricing, sorting. Tomorrow, I would change the locks. Morning light broke across the boxes like a slow confession. By 7:59 a.m., the locksmith's van was in the driveway. He was older, polite, curious, in that professional way that doesn't ask but always knows. Break up, he guessed, eyes on the deadbolt. I smiled thinly. System upgrade. He laughed, replaced the lock in under 20 minutes, handed me 2 new keys, and drove off with the faint smell of brass and coffee. At 8:27, the world went very still. No texts, no calls, just the hum of the refrigerator and the heartbeat sound of peace. At 9:03, peace broke. The handle rattled, scrape, jiggle, then pounding. Kira, what's wrong with the door? Evan's voice, half confusion, half outrage. My key isn't working. I opened it wide, without the chain. He was there, hair messy, duffel in hand, wearing yesterday's arrogance. I changed the locks, I said. His mouth opened and closed. You, what? Why would you? Because you said you needed to test the market, I said. And I'm adjusting my portfolio. Kira, stop joking. Let me in. I leaned against the doorframe. No, this is my condo. My name's on the mortgage. My name's on the utilities. You were a guest who decided to move out. You can't evict me. This is insane. No, I said evenly. This is logistics. He stared past me into the apartment, noticing the blank space on the wall where his neon sign used to be. Where's my stuff? In a safe location, I said. A 10-content storage unit, climate-controlled, paid for the month. Sienna has the second key. His face went white, then red. You gave my stuff to her? She paid half the fee, I said. Fair market split. This isn't funny. It's not meant to be. I'm not mad, Evan. You just priced yourself out of the inventory. He blinked, as if trying to compute a language he'd never studied. You're unbelievable. Probably, I said, and closed the door. The pounding started again, harder this time, echoing through the hallway. Then silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. I made tea, Earl Grey. The civilized choice for the morning after an exorcism. The phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Unknown number. I answered out of habit. Miss Vaughn? A cool female voice asked. This is Renee Pierce, Evan's mother. Of course, the cavalry. Yes, Renee? My son tells me you've illegally changed the locks on his home and are withholding his property. Incorrect. It's my home, and his property is safely stored. He can retrieve it with the key Sienna has. A pause. You can't be serious. I have raised my son to be respectful. He deserves closure and access to his belongings. Don't make this difficult, dear. Renee, I'm not being difficult. I'm being organized. I'd hate to notice a few things about that building, she said sweetly. I know inspectors. Balcony looks wobbly, electrical looks off. Be a shame if the city got involved. There it was, the matriarchal version of menace. I smiled into the phone. That would be a misuse of civic resources, Renee. But if you're worried about safety, I'll have the inspection reports forwarded to you. Passed 6 months ago when I refinanced. The silence on the other end was sharp enough to cut glass. Do you really want this kind of reputation? She asked finally. Which kind? The kind where people think you're vindictive. Oh, I'm not vindictive, I said softly. Just thorough. I hung up. 15 minutes later, my building manager, Jim, texted, FYI. Someone filed 3 anonymous complaints with the city. Balcony integrity, electrical wiring, plumbing leaks. Inspector scheduled Thursday. I stared at the message, took a slow sip of tea, and typed back, all compliant. Let me know if they send anyone. I'll have documentation ready. By noon, another text, Evan. Are you kidding me, Kira? You dragged my mom into this. She's furious. I didn't drag anyone, Evan. She called me. You're a psychopath. Then you should thank me for breaking up. He didn't reply. By evening, I'd mailed Sienna's envelope with the second key, registered, trackable. I included a brief note. You're clear to retrieve your half of the experiment. Good luck. At 9:48 p.m., another ping. Sienna again. He showed up, said you locked him out. I told him I paid for half the unit and that was my only concern. Don't contact me again. Understood. By the way, his mom just threatened to report me to my employer. Charming woman. She has a theme. I muted her too. By the time I went to bed, the quiet had changed flavor. It wasn't peace, it was prelude. The kind of calm that comes right before an earthquake reminds you it was always there, waiting. 3 days later, the earthquake knocked. A sharp, official rap on the door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw 2 city inspectors and a clipboard. Morning, ma'am, one said when I opened. We received multiple safety complaints. Of course you did, I said. Come in. They looked mildly startled at my calm. I guided them through the condo, offered coffee, handed over every recent inspection report. They measured, tested, noted. Everything passed. After 20 minutes, the senior inspector sighed. Everything's to code. Waste of our time, frankly. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it only halfway. He snapped his folder shut. Whoever filed this should be fined for false claims. Happens more than you'd think. Have a good day, ma'am. When the door closed, I laughed quietly. Not triumph, just the absurd relief of a plan working despite itself. That night, another knock. This one wasn't official. When I opened, Evan stood there again. This time, not alone. Beside him, Renee, in pearls and fury. Good evening, I said. City inspectors beat you to it. Renee's smile was sugar-coated poison. We're here for his belongings. Now. They're not here, I said. They're at the storage unit. Address and code were provided. She took a step closer. You think you're clever, little girl, but you'll regret humiliating my son. I already don't, I said. Evan tried to play mediator. Mom, just stop, okay? She's loving this. Evan, I said quietly, I'm not loving anything. I'm just done. Renee exhaled sharply, turned, and left. Her heels clicked like punctuation. Evan lingered one breath longer. I really didn't think you'd do this, he said. I know. He walked away. For the first time in a week, I felt something almost like sadness. Not for him, but for the version of me that thought love meant being chosen instead of choosing. The following morning, Jim called again. City's closing the complaints as unfounded, he said, but you might want to expect a police visit. Word is they're trying the civil standby route next. Of course they are, I said, and made another cup of tea. The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that doesn't sound like a neighbor or a package. 2 firm, official thuds, then silence. When I looked through the peephole, I saw uniforms. Blue, calm, patient. The kind of patience that carries paperwork. I opened the door halfway. Officers. Ms. Vaughn? The taller one asked. We're here on a civil standby. A Mr. Evan Pierce has requested assistance in retrieving his property. Of course, the final act of the entitled trilogy. Behind them, Evan stood on the curb, hands in his pockets, trying to look wounded and wronged at the same time. He'd brought an audience, his mother, Renee, hovering a few steps back, clutching her handbag like a legal exhibit. The shorter officer cleared his throat. He says you've been holding his belongings and refusing to let him access them. I smiled, small, polite. That's incorrect. His belongings are not here. They're safely stored at a rented facility. Can you clarify? Certainly. I handed over a printed copy of the storage contract, crisp and highlighted. Unit 112 at New South Storage, paid in full through the end of the month. I moved everything myself and photographed each box for inventory. He can retrieve it any time with the key I mailed to his co-signer, Ms. Sienna Cho. The taller officer read, brows lifting slightly. Co-signer? Yes. She contributed half the payment. I assumed that implied joint ownership of the situation. Outside, Renee's voice sliced through the air. She's lying. She's keeping his property hostage. Ma'am, one officer called, patient but practiced. We're speaking with Ms. Vaughn right now. I gestured toward the photos displayed neatly on my phone. Labeled boxes, time-stamped images, the neon sign wrapped and intact. Nothing is damaged, nothing is missing, and nothing is here. The officers stepped inside briefly, scanning the clean, echoing living room. The shorter one nodded. You weren't kidding. The taller turned to me. Ms. Vaughn, just to confirm, you've provided him a way to access his property? Yes, through the key mailed to Ms. Cho. From the curb, Evan shouted, She's playing games. I don't have the key. Then you might want to speak with Ms. Cho, I said, not unkindly. She should have received it 2 days ago. Certified mail. The taller officer exchanged a look with his partner, then said quietly, Sounds like a civil matter, sir. Nothing criminal here. Renee started forward. This is harassment. She's destroying his life. The officer didn't flinch. Ma'am, your son's property isn't being withheld. The dispute over a key is not something the police can adjudicate. Evan's jaw tightened. He looked past them, straight at me. You think this makes you righteous, don't you? No, I said. It makes me finished. He stared, breathing shallowly, then turned and walked away. Renee followed, muttering threats about lawyers and connections that sounded less like promises and more like superstition. When the officers left, one of them paused at the door. Ma'am, for what it's worth, that's one of the most organized civil standbys I've ever seen. I smiled faintly. Project management background. He grinned. Explains it. The door shut. Silence again. I stood in the middle of the room and realized my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the absence of it. The adrenaline had nowhere left to go. I made tea, again, because tea is proof that time can be civilized even when people can't. That night, a message lit my phone. Unknown number. I almost didn't open it. Hey, it's Sienna. Don't worry, not drama, just a heads up. Renee called my employer today and threatened to report me for ethical misconduct. I'm done. I mailed the key back to myself. She's insane. Thanks for letting me know, Sienna. I'm sorry they dragged you in. Don't be. Honestly, I kind of admire you. You played it smarter than either of us did. It wasn't a game. That's why you won. I stared at the screen for a long time. Her last message blinked in blue, final, and faintly elegiac. I didn't reply. 3 quiet days passed. The kind that hum with nothing at all. Then Jim, my building manager, called again. Hey, Kira, just an update. City closed everything officially. You're clear. Also, funny thing, the inspector told me off record that someone called twice to check the progress of the investigation. Someone with pearls and free time? He laughed. Exactly that tone. I thanked him and hung up. For the first time in weeks, the air in my apartment didn't feel rented by conflict. It felt like ownership again. Then another text came. Different number. No name. You should watch your back. People talk. No punctuation. No context. Just static and words. I deleted it. There was nothing left to prove. That night I lay awake, not replaying what happened, but recalibrating what didn't. No yelling, no begging, no public spectacle. Just order, preserved through method. He wanted a competition. I gave him a conclusion. Still, part of me waited for the next ripple, because people like Evan never end cleanly. They fade like echoes in buildings you thought were empty. The next ripple arrived 2 days later, and it came in the form of a forwarded email from the storage company. Subject line, Notice of Relinquished Access, Unit 112. I opened it, read once, twice, then smiled. Sienna had beaten him to the finale. The email from the storage company was brief, bureaucratic, and quietly satisfying. Dear Ms. Vaughn, this message is to inform you that Ms. Sienna Cho has relinquished joint access to unit number 112. She entered the facility on the 14th at 2:11 p.m., removed a single item, a custom neon sign reading "The Good Life," and returned her key. Per company policy, the remaining contents will be considered abandoned property if unclaimed within 10 business days. Regards, New South Storage Management. I read it twice, then once more for pleasure. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. The artifact Evan worshipped, his glowing, self-congratulatory shrine, was now in Sienna's living room. A text from her followed minutes later. Hey, I took the sign. It's ridiculous, but it kind of suits my apartment. Tell him if he wants it back, it's $1,500. Venmo only. Blocking this number now. I stared at the screen, mouth curving upward. Not triumph, exactly. Just the strange, buoyant relief of poetic symmetry. Evan had tested the market. The market had filed him under clearance. That evening, I drove to the storage facility. It was quiet, rows of corrugated doors gleaming under motion lights, like a library for other people's mistakes. I unlocked Unit 112. The air smelled of dust, cardboard, and resignation. His boxes sat obediently where I'd left them, labeled, stacked, anonymous. For a long moment, I just stood there, not angry, not nostalgic, just aware of how much space absence can take up. I called the front office. Hi, this is Kira Vaughn. I'm terminating my rental for Unit 1 and 12. The items have been abandoned. Understood, the clerk said, tapping on a keyboard. There'll be a $50 disposal fee. That's fine. He paused. You're the most polite breakup I've ever processed. I smiled. Systems make everything easier. Back home, I opened my budget spreadsheet. Locksmith, $250. Storage unit, $180. Disposal fee, $50 total idiot tax, $480. $480 to remove entitlement from my life. A bargain. The following morning, the sun came through the windows differently. The light didn't have to compete with the neon glare anymore. It just existed, honest, unfiltered. I made coffee, turned on a podcast about personal finance, and realized something simple but freeing. I didn't need to move on. Moving on implied there was still a race. I'd already finished. No social media posts, no speeches, no performative rebirths, just quiet, the kind that hums when no one's watching. At noon, a final text arrived, from an unfamiliar number, but the tone was unmistakable. You win. That was all. No signature, no punctuation, just concession in lowercase. I deleted it. Later that week, Jim caught me in the hallway carrying a toolbox. Hey, Kira, guess what? City inspector called me again, said those anonymous complaints are officially flagged as harassment now. If it happens again, they'll investigate him. I thanked him, locked my door, and stood still for a moment in my living room. The air was cool, the silence whole. I thought about the people who crave chaos because silence terrifies them. The ones who mistake calm for weakness, boundaries for cruelty. They forget that structure can be an act of love, especially when it's love redirected toward yourself. The dishwasher clicked to life at 12:01. The spreadsheet on my laptop blinked green across every column. Everything was humming, ordinary, functional. Competence, once again, was ballast. No one thanks ballast until the boat lists. But that's the thing about being steady. You don't need thanks. You just stay afloat.